Good morning. In today's headlines, Tucker Carlson interviews Hunter Biden's former business associate Devon Archer, and House Oversight Chair James Comer says Archer provided new leads in the panel's Biden family probe.
Secret Service agents, U.S. Marshals, metal barriers. Former President Donald Trump heads to Washington for arraignment today amid beefed-up security measures.
While in court, obstruction and conspiracy charges will be outlined. We learn more about what to expect.
FBI agents recover over 200 sex trafficking victims during a nationwide effort. Dozens of suspects were arrested.
2 U.S. drug makers could be facing legal action. It comes after patients suffered severe reactions to the company's diabetes drugs. One woman was hospitalized.
And dozens of cooks work at making the largest tortilla sandwich at this year's Torta Fair in Mexico City. But will it beat last year's record? Good morning. Welcome to NTD. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm Evelyn Lee. Today is Thursday, August 3rd.
Meanwhile, as Archer's Talk with Tucker Carlson was being aired, President Biden was seen soaking up the sun at Rehoboth Beach in Delaware.
Well, a White House spokesperson said that Carlson was cherry-picking with Archer.
Ian Sams, who speaks on oversight and investigation, says Joe Biden was never in business with his son and said Archer's testimony shows that they never talked business.
Right. Well, he says Carlson is putting a spin on it and trying to mislead people, but of course we'll let you decide. And here's what happened, because Tucker Carlson released the interview with Devon Archer yesterday. Archer is Hunter Biden's former business partner. They both served on the board of Ukrainian gas company Burisma and later founded the investment firm Rosemont Seneca together. Carlson released the interview just 2 days after Archer's closed-door interview with the House Oversight Committee. Archer testified that Hunter Biden put his father, who was then vice president, on speakerphone during business meetings over 20 times. That appears to contradict Biden's repeated denial of having any involvement in his son's business dealings. Here's a clip from Carlson's interview with Archer.
To be, completely clear on the calls, I don't know if it was an orchestrated call in or not. It certainly was powerful, though, because if you're sitting with a foreign business person and you hear the vice president's voice, that's prize enough. I mean, that's pretty impactful stuff for anyone in the world.
You're taking a call from the vice president and you put it on speaker. It's not just, hey, Dad, I'm in a meeting with some buddies.
Right.
It's, let me put my dad, the vice president, on speaker.
Yeah. Yep. In the rear view, it's an abuse of soft power, I'd say.
It's not clear if Carlson's interview was conducted before or after Archer testified before Congress. Carlson only released part 1 of his interview with Devon Archer so far.
House Oversight Chair James Comer says Archer's testimony provides a roadmap for the next steps in the committee's investigation into the Biden family's business dealings. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more on Comer's leads.
Congressman James Comer says Devon Archer's testimony provided a number of leads in the Biden family probe for investigators to chase down. Many Republicans saw Archer's testimony as proof of the president lying about his alleged involvement in his son's business affairs, while some Democrats said it showed nothing of the sort, and that Hunter Biden merely sold the illusion of access to his father. Comer says the panel's investigation will be broadened to include President Biden's brothers, Hunter Biden's artwork sales, and a meeting the president and his son allegedly had with a Russian oligarch in 2014. The House Oversight Chair says Archer's testimony shows that members of the Biden family have been selling access to the government for around 2 decades. Archer testified that Hunter Biden would put his father on speakerphone in meetings to sell the brand. He told Tucker Carlson he met Joe Biden, who was then vice president, probably around 20 times.
Yeah, I think I can definitively say at particular dinners or meetings, he knew there were business associates, and or if I was there, I was a business associate too.
Comer announced the release of a bank records memorandum in May that discusses how financial records obtained by the committee show the Biden family and associates established a complicated network of companies during Joe Biden's vice presidency and received millions of dollars from foreign sources. The congressman alleges James Biden, President Biden's brother, was one of the recipients. He says he will try to interview him and other family members. Hunter Biden's art sales are also a focus for Comer. He's questioned if the first son was using high-value art to evade U.S. sanctions as part of an influence peddling scheme to foreign adversaries, and says he fears some of the paintings may have been bought by Chinese buyers looking to leverage their purchases into political influence. A meeting brought up in Archer's testimony will also be investigated, allegedly attended by Biden and a Russian oligarch in 2014. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
And we continue with the Trump coverage. Security precautions are a top priority as former President Donald Trump heads to Washington, D.C. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the arraignment happening today.
Both federal and local law enforcement have been cooperating to implement security measures for Trump's arrival. Secret Service conducted a walkthrough at the federal D.C. courthouse ahead of the former president's appearance. Crews erected metal barriers to control pedestrians. The Federal Protective Service parked their vehicles along Constitution Avenue, and the U.S. Marshal Service has beefed up protection for judges working on the case. A 911 call about an active shooter heightened tensions on Wednesday. A caller reported a heavy-set Hispanic male wearing body armor inside a Senate office building. But the D.C. Metro Police said there were no injuries and no shooter was located, and said it may have been a bogus call. Trump will be arraigned after being indicted over a series of alleged schemes to overturn the 2020 election and for his alleged conduct following the U.S. Capitol breach. The hearing will be the latest twist in an extraordinary and historic saga surrounding an ex-president and frontrunner for a major party nomination in 2024 who has so far been indicted in 3 separate criminal probes. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Ahead of the court appearance, a Trump spokesperson told NTD yesterday the indictment was an encroachment on protected free speech. Here's that statement.
Well, it's really a travesty of justice. It's election interference once again, using taxpayer dollars to try to remove the number one political opponent of this corrupt government. And really what they're saying in this sham indictment is you have no political speech, you cannot dissent, you cannot contest a very corrupt election. You can't do that out in the open, which is what President Trump did. And they're saying that if you disagree with the government, we have the right to throw you in jail. And it's just totally un-American. And it's a real travesty. And we're going to fight this and we will win.
Former President Trump says his latest indictment has awoken the world to corruption, scandal, and failure in the United States in the last several years. He has denied all wrongdoing related to the 2020 election amid conspiracy and obstruction charges. We're bringing in a reporter who has covered developments surrounding Trump very closely to give us an idea of what to expect as he goes to court today at 4 p.m. Janice Heisel, reporter for the Epoch Times, joins us live. Janice, it is great to have you with us today. Can you please walk us through what is set to happen at Trump's arraignment?
Good morning. Yes. So having been a reporter for many, many years and covering many, many appearances just like this one, I can tell you that the normal procedure, even for an extraordinary situation like this one, is going to just involve the judge reading the charges to the defendant. In this case, that will be former President Donald Trump. And then there will be a discussion about, whether, what kind of a bond will be set here. There will be discussion about a plea being entered here. And there may be an attempt to try to change the venue. Now, that might be premature. It may not be done just now, but there is already talk about moving this proceeding. And we, of course, expect Trump to plead not guilty, correct? Yes, that is the, very clear signal that has been put out by Mr. Trump himself as well as his surrogates, yes. And you mentioned the desire to move the case. Trump lawyer John Laurel disagrees with the speedy trial that special counsel Jack Smith is asking for and suggested that the case can be heard in West Virginia instead of Washington. So how will the timeline and the setting affect the outcome? Well, the setting is really important in any criminal case, but in this particular one, we do know that the area where the court is right now, Washington, D.C., is a very heavily Democratic area. There are very many more registered Democrats than Republicans. And as you know, of course, being the Republican front runner, former President Trump does face an uphill battle with a jury pool that is mostly overwhelmingly Democrat. So a lot of people think that the outcome of the case could not be fair, possibly, if a jury that's kind of stacked against him is making the decision here.
And to get your reaction on this, Lauro says that the right to a speedy trial lies with the defense and that what they want is a fair trial, not simply a fast one. What's your take on this?
Well, I can tell you that in any case along these lines with federal charges, there is going to be a lot of what's called discovery, meaning exchange of information between the lawyers. And it will take quite a long time for the defense to, number one, find out what the government has in terms of the evidence, but also then to try to conduct its own interviews with witnesses that are either for the government or defense witnesses that would be helpful to the former president's case.
And Lauro says that the DOJ under Biden has been investigating this case for years now, and there's likely going to be a lot of documents, and they need time to look at them all in its totality. So is that along the lines of what you're saying here?
Absolutely. And of course, former Trump staffer Kash Patel he's also an attorney, and he has stated that based on his knowledge of such cases, there's no way that this case could go to trial within a year.
And of course, that would be in the midst of this election cycle here. Now, what bail conditions are we expecting here?
Well, there was some concern that perhaps the judge might try to keep former President Trump locked up, like a lot of the defendants in the January 6th cases have been. However, the purpose of bond is to just ensure that the person who is accused will show up for court proceedings. And considering that former President Trump is not the kind of person who could just move throughout society with no one knowing where he is, it's very unlikely that they would keep him, try to keep him detained. Of course, his lawyers would be arguing against that. So it would be extremely shocking to, I think, everyone if they were to try to do that in this case.
Janice Heisel, reporter for the Epoch Times, thank you so much for your update.
Thank you.
And we'll have more on the Trump case and what some Americans think of the indictment after the break.
The stories that need to be told, the voices that need to be heard, the truth that you need to see. Get unbiased and in-depth news. Don't miss a beat. I'm Stephanie Cox. At NTD, we're here for you.
What is China like really? Is it defined by its giant economy, an oppressive government, or its people? By the worst persecutors or the most courageous freedom fighters? We're lifting the veil to look at global impacts and how close the regime is to your doorstep. From eyewitnesses and analysts, get the facts. Here on China in Focus.
Good to have you back. To analyze the legal ramifications of this latest indictment, NTD's Melina Weisskopf spoke with Professor William Jacobson from Cornell Law School to discuss what the 4 charges against Trump actually mean and what kind of evidence is needed to prove them. Listen.
We know there's 4 felony charges. 3 of those 4 are conspiracy charges. So from your perspective, what kind of evidence is needed to prove those conspiracy charges? And then are those more difficult charges to prove?
Well, what you're going to need is you're going to need evidence that they were intending to commit a crime. There is no crime of just conspiring. You can conspire to do something lawful. That's not a crime. It's what were they conspiring to do. And once you prove a conspiracy, and once you prove that someone was a participant in it, then it opens up the evidence fairly widely as to what comes into evidence. Anything that was done to further the conspiracy could be used against you.
Do you think that they actually have that hard evidence and will be able to prove those conspiracy charges?
Well, you know, the federal government has been known not to be completely truthful in the past, but let's go on the assumption they think they can prove these things, that the allegations were made in good faith. The question is there a crime here? That's what I think a lot of people are questioning. A lot of what they're complaining about, a lot of the indictment is constitutionally protected speech. For better or worse, politicians are allowed to lie. That's not a crime. Maybe a reason not to vote for them, but it's not a crime. So it's not really clear what is the actual crime that was committed here. And that's something a judge is going to have to rule on.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective. I want to ask you also about the obstruction of Congress charge. Do you think that they have enough evidence to prove this, considering the fact that Trump wasn't even going inside the Capitol building?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the whole point. What was the disruption of Congress that took place? It was the riot. It wasn't Trump talking to people in Georgia or making phone calls or going on TV. They don't charge him with inciting the riot. And that's a very key point. A lot of people, and frankly, my initial thought was when I saw the media reports is he was being indicted for the January 6th riot. But he's not. That's actually not what the indictment says. The indictment says he was trying to obstruct things by convincing people to create fake certificates that they're electors and things like that. But that is, that's, I think, a major defect in the indictment. I'm not saying the indictment's going to get thrown out, but my guess is that the prosecutors have the evidence they claim they have, but it's going to be up to a judge and eventually a jury as to whether that's actually a crime.
What's your message to those who genuinely believe, because there are a lot of folks in America that genuinely believe that Trump did something wrong and he did incite this riot and he should be charged for this issue? What do you say to those people?
Well, I would say distinguish between political wrongs and criminal wrongs. That it would be perfectly within someone's right to say, I don't like the fact that he was lying about these things. That's a perfectly good reason not to vote for somebody. But that doesn't mean it's a crime. And I think the criminalization of politics is a very negative trend in our society.
I think that's a very insightful point, William. Separate politics from fact. Last question for you. I want to ask about your perspective on the current ongoing Georgia case where Trump is potentially going to have a fourth indictment. What do you think about that case that's ongoing?
Georgia seems like it's going to be something similar to D.C. It's going to be a conspiracy. It's going to be a lot of bits and pieces. And the question is going to be, what is the conspiracy? What was the illegal thing he was trying to do? And that is not abundantly clear in Georgia. There is that tape when he talks about finding new votes and finding more votes. But I think a reasonable interpretation of that is what he was said. I've listened to the audio. So what he was saying is, make sure all of the votes have been counted. Make sure there are none out there, because we all know it's not uncommon for days and sometimes weeks after an election for new votes to be found. Doesn't mean they're illegal votes. So the question in Georgia is going to be, was he trying to get people to do something illegal, or was he simply trying to persuade them that they hadn't done their job well enough and they needed to do a better job of counting the votes? Telling a state official, you need to do your job better, is not illegal.
And Evelyn, according to John Laura, one of Trump's attorneys, the defense is going to have a hard time, the prosecution is going to have a hard time here just because free speech encompasses political advocacy. And that would just mean that if Trump has a position that there is fraud in the election, he can act on that position, such as calling on VP Pence to not certify, send the electors back to the states, and have some audits done there.
Right. Well, good point. Thank you for adding that. And you can go to ntd.com to watch the full interview and Capitol Report as well.
And now, what do Americans think about the new charges brought against Trump? To find out, we asked some people in D.C. Take a look.
I think it's politically motivated. If he wasn't running, it wouldn't have happened.
I think it's justice being served.
It is what it is. I'm kind of upset that it happened, but it happens.
That's why we have laws in place and we have a judicial system in place.
Well, I think we should let the law follow the course.
I'm sorry that it's happening, but I guess the old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire.
I think the whole thing is pretty disappointing and kind of a scary trend for a democracy.
From the day one, since when he got into the presidency, they've just, every day it's just always something new that they're trying to catch him on.
We are wasting so much time, 4 years, on these kinds of things instead of what really needs to be addressed, what we sent them up there to do.
It was a wrong thing to do, to incite the insurrection, and I believe that's what he did.
I believe it was a free and fair election with a valid outcome.
Biden won and Trump lost.
I think the Electoral College was put in place and it works correctly, so I don't think anything was gone amiss.
I think the election was fair.
I do think them sending out mass ballots, dead people voted. An absentee ballot is the way to go.
Definitely Trump was really pushing the false election narrative. And, but is that a criminal offense? And it's, 3 years later, Again, I think it's a legal stretch. I don't think it's going to win, but they're just trying to make sure he doesn't run. So whether he actually goes to jail for it, I really don't think so.
And stay tuned because we will have special coverage on Trump's arraignment from 3:30 until 5:30 Eastern Time today.
And former President Trump is expected to deliver remarks in Windham, New Hampshire next Tuesday.
That's right. Now moving on to China. China is reportedly pouring its resources into producing legacy chips, and this has the West worried. So what is going on in the China-U.S. chip war? We're bringing in a retired Marine Colonel Grant Newsom. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy and a contributor for the Epoch Times. Good morning, Grant. The EU and U.S., as I just mentioned, are worried about China pouring the investments into that legacy chip market. What are they worried about? Can you run us through what it means for the economy and security?
Well, the specific thing that they're worried about is that China can make a ton of these rather average chips, the so-called legacy chips. They're not the highest end, but they're ones you need to make all sorts of things. And China has the ability to make things at such a scale that they could pretty much drive out any foreign competitors, even in their own countries, and come to dominate this part of the supply chain. It's the manufacturing supply chain. So it may not be the high end of it, but it is an absolutely essential part. And China has shown that they can manufacture at scale. And that's really the immediate concern when China says, okay, if you're going to restrict our supplies of the high end semiconductors, our ability to obtain them, well, we're going to go after these chips that ultimately are just as important, and we're going to dominate the market, if not control it. So that's the specific concern here. But it's part of a much larger trade war, which is actually a manifestation of a real war that's ongoing between the Chinese and the free world.
Now, with that, when you say dominate the market, can you go in a bit more detail? What are the risks that really come with that, and maybe where does it put us in that trade war?
Well, it's one manifestation of the communist Chinese having us dependent on so many things. There's obviously pharmaceuticals, drugs that everybody uses, legal drugs. China supplies illegal ones as well, but I'm just talking about lawful pharmaceuticals. That vast majority of the materials for these, or the actual drugs themselves, come from China. That's a form of dependency. There's high-end magnets that America needs for F-35 fighter jets. Well, most of those come from China. So it's this concern over dependency on the Chinese regime and the Chinese using it as a weapon against us. China will just say, well, we're just doing to you what you're doing to us. But that's not really the best way to look at it. This is very unfortunate that the West, the United States, has gotten itself so dependent on so many things that are manufactured in China that it has to pull its punches. It has to give the Chinese more influence than it would otherwise have. And it is the thing you have to go back to the bottom line here is that the Chinese see themselves at war with the United States, with the West. And the economic front on this is where we're seeing this play out.
Right, and that needs to be put into perspective. Thank you for that. For the U.S., so how big of a deal, just recently, the gallium and germanium restrictions that just kicked in this month, how big of a deal are they?
Well, it's a big deal. These are materials that are used in semiconductors, fiber optics, obviously things that you've got to have. But the thing to keep in mind when China does announce a boycott of these, or a cutoff in their supplies of these materials, what that does is it tends to open up other sources of supply. It'll suddenly become profitable for other companies, other countries to produce these things. Even the United States can produce them. We saw in 2010 when China basically cut off rare earth exports to Japan, China was supplying about 97% of the world's rare earths. About a decade later, they now supply maybe 60%. Because people have found other sources of supply, it starts getting produced elsewhere. But for an immediate period, there is going to be some disruption, but you're going to find that it's available somewhere. But it does point out how dangerous it can be when you have a country which calls you the enemy that it wants to destroy, producing these absolutely essential materials that we have to have really for our economy to function.
Right. Now, obviously, before we go, there has been U.S. export bans as well, but there's reports that companies with strong ties to China, like AMD and NVIDIA, are reportedly specifically now creating chips that can be sent into China. So how successful has China been with evading these sanctions, and what can be done about that?
Well, they've certainly watered down efforts to apply sanctions on the PRC, and that's the nature of American business. Sometimes it seems it forgets whose country's name is on their passports. There is an amorality to these people where they don't see anything more than their bottom line. They don't look at really the nature of the U.S.-China relationship. They don't look at the nature of this regime that they insist on doing business with. They seem to think that concentration camps, black prisons, organ harvesting, taking other people's territory, that's okay. Because they can make some money. So it really is as clear an example as you will find of American business pretty much selling out the free world and the free world's beliefs and values. At some point they're going to have to wake up, and hopefully we don't have to pay too high a price for it. But China has always been very successful at getting their friends on Wall Street and in the business class to have Capitol Hill, to have any administration water down any sanctions that get applied to China. But China doesn't like even the sanctions that do get applied, and you can see how they scream bloody murder. And that shows you that it really hurts them. So when the PRC complains about something, you know you're doing something right and maybe ought to do more of it.
That's right. Very good point. So thank you so much, Colonel Grant Newsom. I appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Still to come, an update on the situation in Niger. The U.S. is pulling some personnel from its embassy following the coup.
And the U.S. State Department is concerned about Beijing's counter-espionage push. The regime is now calling for a nationwide campaign to spy on others. We have the latest.
Shen Yun Creations, the streaming platform from Shen Yun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Hey, I told you enough of that.
But look, this is different. It's Ganjin well.
Ganjin World. Family-friendly entertainment.
Welcome back. The U.S. is pulling some personnel from the embassy in Niger following the coup in the African nation. The evacuation applies to non-emergency government employees and family members. This doesn't mean the U.S. is closing down the embassy or evacuating all diplomats. The embassy will remain open with reduced staff and emergency services. The roughly 1,100 U.S. troops in Niger are also not expected to leave the country at this point. The embassy asked Americans in the country who wish to leave to register with the State Department. A travel advisory warns Americans not to travel to Niger, setting a level 4 advisory, the highest possible.
Continuing with the developments in Niger, the U.S. says it would not be surprised if the Wagner Group attempted to exploit the situation there to its own advantage. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller reacted.
I mean, to their own personal financial advantage, as well as their attempt to expand their influence on the continent. Any attempt by the military leaders in Niger to bring the Wagner forces into Niger would be a sign, yet another sign, that they do not have the best interests of the Nigerian people at heart.
A White House response to Beijing's call for a nationwide counter-espionage campaign.
State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said China is encouraging citizens to spy on each other, calling it something of great concern.
We are closely monitoring the implementation of China's new counter-espionage law, as we have been, which, as written, greatly expands the scope of what activities are considered espionage. In addition to being concerned about these new reports, we remain concerned about the risk of arbitrary arrest and detention.
China's spy agency on Tuesday mobilized all citizens to participate in counter-espionage work. That includes setting up channels for people to report suspicious activities and rewarding whistleblowers.
The notice follows Beijing's enforcement of a new anti-spying law, which largely expands the definition of espionage.
The State Department issued an update advisory last month, warning U.S. citizens to reconsider traveling to mainland China. That's due to the risk of wrongful detention.
Miller said Secretary of State Antony Blinken had raised the issue during his meetings with Chinese officials.
And now let's get to some short headlines from around the world. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his wife Sophie said yesterday they are separating. It was a surprise announcement after 18 years of high-profile marriage. His father, former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, separated from his wife Margaret in 1977 when he was in office.
Nearly half of UK parents have observed increased socio-emotional difficulties in their children after pandemic lockdowns. The new study says almost 50% of parents reported in early 2021 that their child's social and emotional skills had worsened. The report highlighted better outcomes in the socio-emotional skills of children whose parents had a stable job throughout the pandemic.
Miners in a vast open-cast coal quarry in Serbia discovered a Roman ship dating back to the 3rd or 4th century AD. The vessel was probably part of a river fleet serving the highly developed Roman city, which had a port near a tributary of the Danube River. Other discoveries in the area include golden tiles, jade sculptures, mosaics and frescoes, and weapons. Microsoft says Russia-linked hackers are behind dozens of phishing attacks. U.S. and U.K. intelligence agencies say the group is linked to Russian foreign intelligence. The hackers set up domains and accounts designed to look like technical support. They tricked Microsoft Teams users into helping them get past multi-factor identification. The hacking group known as Midnight Blizzard has been making attacks since 2018. Microsoft didn't reveal the names of the organizations victimized by these attacks. Researchers from Microsoft said they will investigate the matter. The Russian embassy has made no comment on the issue so far.
Cybersecurity is just so important, and there has to be something done as a deterrent to keep this from happening.
Yeah, and otherwise you can't trust anybody at this point. Well, still to come, a major FBI operation. Agents recovered over 200 sex trafficking victims during a nationwide effort last month.
And with dozens of migrants camped out in the streets of the Big Apple, word is out about a new plan to erect tents in public green spaces like Central Park. Stay tuned for that.
Anyone who's ever sold a home will tell you it's really hard. And it's one of the biggest financial decisions you'll ever make. That's why who you work with matters. Together with HomeLight, we take care of every detail.
Looking for a healthy and smooth-tasting brew? Drop by Days Coffee Roasters today and explore our wide selection of specialty-grade, small-batch roasted coffee. Home to North America's first enzyme-fermented coffee, we source a wide selection of specialty-grade coffee beans from around the world, and our baristas are ready to craft your customized brew. Visit Days Coffee at 28 North Street, Middletown, New York. Come experience a brew like no other.
It's good to have you back with us. FBI agents recovered over 200 sex trafficking victims during a nationwide operation last month. The operation also identified or arrested over 100 suspects in human trafficking crimes. Here's the story.
The FBI announced this week the achievements of Operation Cross Country, a campaign to combat child exploitation and human trafficking. It involved nearly every FBI field office, other federal agencies, state and local police, and social service agencies across the country. The operation led to 126 suspects of child sexual exploitation and human trafficking being identified or arrested, and 68 suspects of trafficking being identified or arrested. The campaign also located over 200 victims of sex trafficking. This includes 59 victims of child sex trafficking and sexual exploitation, and another 59 children who had been reported missing. FBI Director Christopher Wray said in a statement, "Human trafficking is a grave violation of human rights that preys on the most vulnerable members of our society. The FBI's actions against this threat never waver as we continue to send our message that these atrocities will not be tolerated." The latest operation is now in its 13th year. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, there were more than 19,000 reports of possible child sex trafficking in 2022 alone. Roughly 1 in 6 of the children reported missing to the agency in 2022 who had run away were likely victims of child sex trafficking.
Dozens of migrants continue to sleep on the streets of New York, waiting for shelter in front of the Roosevelt Hotel. The hotel is used by the city as a reception center for newly arrived illegal immigrants. Officials say the immigrants are mostly single men waiting for a space to free up in the city's shelters. The shelters, however, are overcrowded as more and more illegal immigrants continue to show up. A new report says New York City officials are considering a plan to put migrants in tents in Manhattan Central Park and Brooklyn's Prospect Park. The move would be part of a plan to find new shelter locations for some of the over 95,000 illegal immigrants that have arrived in the past 15 months. New York's Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services reacted.
People on the one hand cannot accuse us of not having enough space, of telling us not to go to certain places, and then on the other hand tell us, well, you can't go here and you can't go there. We are making the best decisions that we can, given the information that we get.
Well, New York Mayor Eric Adams has repeatedly criticized the Biden administration for not providing enough support to help the city manage the crisis. Texas Governor Greg Abbott began busing migrants to New York and other sanctuary cities last year. He called the move part of an effort to combat illegal immigration and call attention to the crisis communities at the southern border.
Yeah, and it does remind me of that flyer that was seen at the border in which New York City was telling migrants to go to a different city. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has agreed to debate California Governor Gavin Newsom. Fox News host Sean Hannity floated the idea to Newsom in June during an interview.
Newsom said he was all in. Hannity will be moderating the debate and framed it as a policy-based debate between leaders of blue and red states.
DeSantis says it's about far more than that. The 2024 presidential candidate called it a debate for the future of the country.
A date for the debate has not yet been set. A spokesman for Newsom proposed early November. North Carolina, Nevada, and Georgia were suggested as potential locations.
And a new twist in the ongoing battle between Walt Disney World and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. All diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives were abolished by Disney's governing district. The Tourism Oversight District made the announcement Tuesday. It serves as the municipal government and taxing district of the property occupied by the Disney World Resort. The governing board said it would dissolve the DEI committee and shut down any related programs, saying they waste taxpayer dollars, are illegal, racist, and un-American. Disney and the Florida government have been at odds since the entertainment company publicly opposed a Florida law. It banned gender ideology for kindergarten through third grade students. Disney is suing the board and DeSantis, accusing them of retaliating against the company for exercising its First Amendment rights. And elected leaders in Erie, Pennsylvania have voted to declare their community an LGBT sanctuary city. NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with Dr. Tony Ruffa on the move, which comes as an apparent response to sexually explicit books being removed from public libraries in the city.
Dr. Ruffa says the LGBT community had a display set up in a city library during Pride Month.
sexually explicit books that, would describe certain acts and how to do it. Promoting the transgender, homosexual, bisexual, whatever agenda. And, we never had heterosexual books in front of the library. I mean, those, we don't display that.
Parents complained that the books were inappropriate, and the Erie County executive agreed to move the books to the back where they could be accessed but not displayed.
Well, that caused an uproar, of course, because the Democrat Party and the LGBTQ themselves are very outspoken and feel they're being discriminated against. And in fact, Erie has a 7 out of 7 rating for welcoming transgender the population.
Erie also has an LGBT council to advise the mayor. Erie City Council member Susanna Faulkner sponsored the Sanctuary City Resolution. It was later approved by the City Council in July. It urges city police to minimally enforce any, quote, hostile human rights law that would impact access to health care and education for LGBT individuals. Rufa says the Erie resolution takes a paragraph from a resolution in Kansas City, which itself became a sanctuary city after Kansas banned cross-sex procedures on minors.
So that the kids can go to Kansas City in the state of Kansas, or any other state, come to Kansas City and have those surgeries performed by doctors in hospitals without any criminal charges or criminal state charges, but they wouldn't be enforced in Kansas City. Why are we inviting doctors to come in and perform hysterectomies on our 12-year-olds and protecting them? Why would we do that?
Rufa believes passing the resolution is the first step on a slippery slope.
They're going to use this for legal purposes. They're going to take this resolution and take it to court. And then they're going to take this resolution and bring it to the schools and say, we want kids, we want men and girls sports. We want men and girls locker rooms. We want drag queens in the libraries. This is, you're setting up a bad precedent. Leave well enough alone. This community accepts the transgender population with love and affection.
Rufa makes it clear that he's not criticizing the LGBT orientation. For him, the issue is pushing those values onto kids at an early age, causing them to get confused. Dr. Rufa plans to introduce his own resolution that would make Erie County a sanctuary for kids, where they wouldn't be exposed to sexually explicit books or children of the opposite sex in their changing facilities. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Coming up, 2 U.S. drug makers are facing legal action after their diabetes drugs caused severe stomach injuries in multiple patients. The drugs are also used for weight loss. That and more after the break.
Being prepared is a part of who you are, but it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
How prepared is your family if a tornado shows up at your doorstep, or a flood, or a hurricane? You can't just turn away a natural disaster. That's why it's important to go to ready.gov/plan now. It has the tools and tips you need to make an emergency plan with your family. So if disaster comes knocking,
let's go.
You'll be ready to help keep your family safe.
It's just a pizza. Yes.
Make a plan today.
Welcome back. We have our new finance and consumer segment for you. We bring in Don Ma, host of NTD Business. He joins us live. Thanks for coming on, Don. Ratings agency
good morning, Kevin.
Fitch. Good morning. Rating agency Fitch has downgraded the U.S. credit rating. So what does that mean?
So first, a credit rating is an assessment of the credit worthiness or credit risk, if you will, of an individual. So in this case, we're talking about the U.S. government. Now, what that means is essentially, in a nutshell, what Fitch is saying is that there is a higher risk that the U.S. will default on its debt. So Fitch downgraded the United States rating from AAA, now that's the highest rating, to AA+. And it's still a very strong rating, but just a smidge lower. A government's credit rating affects its borrowing costs in financial markets. Higher credit rating indicates lower risk, and therefore the government can borrow money at lower interest rates. And on the other hand, lower credit rating implies higher risk, leading to higher interest rates on government bonds.
Okay, so is this going to have an impact on the long-term U.S.?
You know, probably not. Not a long-term impact or a lasting impact on the U.S. because the bigger factor that matters for the trajectory of the U.S. economy isn't so much the rating itself. The rating is more of an opinion on what Fitch thinks is going to happen and how that plays into the U.S.'s ability to honor its debts. So in terms of the trajectory of the economy, what I'm really watching is more what's happening with the labor market, what's happening with consumer spending, business investment, all these components that filter to top line growth and keep the engine running. And those generally not too dependent on the rating. So in terms of just going from the very top rating to a still very, very strong rating, it's not going to have a material effect on the things that really matter and determine the path of are we going to have this soft landing or not.
Okay, so Don, what else can you tell us?
Yeah, so following Fitch's historic downgrade of U.S. debt, mortgage rates actually rose yesterday. The yield on 10-year treasuries climbed to a new high since November, and the fixed rate for a 30-year mortgage usually follows the 10-year treasury yield, so keep that in mind. Chief economist said the rise was a direct result of the Fitch downgrade. And at the same time, the IRS is going digital in 2025. And what that means for you is you could get your refund sooner. The agency is ditching paper filing tax returns for digital ones. The plan is dubbed the Paperless Processing Initiative. The IRS says the change will cut processing times in half and speed up refunds by up to 4 weeks. And taxpayers will also be able to submit more correspondence online and e-file up to 20 additional tax forms. But citizens still have the option of mailing in paper returns if they want to. And as well, parents seems like shelling out more cash this year to send their kids back to class. According to a new survey, the average American household will spend $250 more than last year. And if you want to save money, here are some tips. Parents can take inventory of what you already have to see what's really needed right now. Then you can set a budget and get your kids involved with the shopping. You can also buy in bulk and split the cost with others. And instead of splurging on new electronics, stretch out the old ones a bit longer and wait for the shopping rush to pass. And just one more update for you. It's probably good news for those planning on a trip because on Friday, the National Park Service is waiving entrance fees to all of its attractions. That's in honor of the 3rd anniversary of the Great American Outdoors Act. But the fee waiver only applies to the cost of entry, not camping fees. The Park Service is also offering fee-free days on September 23rd for National Public Lands Day and November 11th for Veterans Day. And that's all from me today. Kevin, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Don. And that is some really great news that parents are able to spend more money to equip their children for back-to-school season, especially considering all this inflation. Thank you.
Sure.
U.S. drug makers are potentially facing a wave of personal injury lawsuits. This over claims that they failed to warn patients about serious side effects of their blockbuster diabetes and weight loss drugs.
The lawsuit was filed yesterday against drug makers Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. That's after a woman from Louisiana suffered severe vomiting after taking the drugs Ozempic and Mounjaro.
Both drugs can cause stomach paralysis and severe vomiting. The woman reportedly had such a strong reaction to the drugs that she was hospitalized and lost teeth.
According to the law firm, several hundred other clients claimed they contracted gastroparesis after taking these drugs. That's a disorder that slows or stops the movement of food from the stomach to the small intestine.
The disorder is known to cause nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain. Both drugs are prescribed for the treatment of diabetes and are part of a new type of drug also aimed at weight loss. The companies said both drugs have been on the market for years and contain all relevant information about side effects.
And there is an old saying that any publicity is good publicity. country singer Jason Aldean's latest hit shows there may be some truth to that.
His new song, Try That in a Small Town, has scored his first film ever Billboard #1 spot. This after nearly 20 years as a top Nashville hitmaker.
New hires are struggling with basic skills because the pandemic lockdown stunted their educational experiences.
How are businesses dealing with the current workforce? NTD's Colin Fredrickson takes a look.
New job hires are having a difficult time after years of learning from home. ACT CEO Janet Godwin says more high school graduates lack the fundamental skills needed for college and work. Students who were already doing poorly are now doing far worse. Companies have to teach new hires things like how to look at people when talking to them, how to make change at a cash register, how to dress appropriately, cell phone etiquette, even basic hygiene. Pass rates on assessment exams have all gone down. For nurses, soldiers, office workers, and engineers, the ones who make it through still have a hard time adapting.
It's important for leaders of organizations, no matter what kind, if it's an educational institution, an employer, a house of worship, it's important that we have to work even harder to create spaces that are safe and supportive.
Consultant Corinthia Barber has helped people transition from staying home all day to a work environment. She sees anxiety as a key theme among her clients. The world they see around them is different from what they got used to, both during and before the lockdowns.
Communication is everything. Sometimes we avoid communicating, verbalizing our concerns.
Psychologist Michelle Leno has also helped people readjust. She says it's important for workers to talk to their supervisors or colleagues about the challenges they're facing. Bringing these up may be difficult, but it may also be necessary.
And if we do not talk about it, if we don't address it and we avoid it, it just kind of builds and builds and builds and adds to our anxiety.
Experts suggest that businesses should stop hiring people based on skills because right now many prospects don't have the necessary skills. Businesses should instead hire based on applicants' motivation to learn. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
Wow, but that just, I think the list in the very beginning was interesting, relearning eye contact and all that stuff. I think that just really shows us now how much we learn from social interactions in our everyday life.
Yeah, and there's the hard skills and then of course the soft skills which help you stay in that role and really thrive.
Exactly, and some even make the argument that that's more important now.
Wow, and recruiting top talent is always a top concern for these companies.
Exactly, yeah. All right, we're heading into break now.
And the York fire in California caused heavy destruction in one popular national preserve. We have more information coming up, so stay with us.
Stay tuned to get 2 rolls of alien tape free. You wouldn't stick your mother-in-law on the wall, but you could with alien tape. It just sticks. Just peel and stick to make anything stay in place quick. Brick, pavers, marble, tile, plastic, even leather. Nothing works better than alien tape. You wouldn't stick your fishbowl on a moving car, but you could with alien tape. The secret is nano-stick technology that grabs and locks on to secure one side of the surface to the other. Alien tape secures in seconds, then twist, pull, and rinse to reuse. Call or go online to get your first roll of alien tape for just $19.99, plus shipping and processing. But to make this deal really stick, we'll give you 2 more rolls absolutely free. You get 3 rolls of alien tape for one low price. Order now.
To order, call 1-800-490-1364 or go to tryalientape.com. So call 1-800-490-1364 or order online at tryalientape.com.
Good to have you back. News of wildfires are often disheartening, especially to nature lovers. However, as our next story tells us, hope can be found in the midst of disaster.
The recent York fire decimated a large portion of Mojave National Preserve in California. Many iconic Joshua trees, junipers, and other vegetation didn't escape the devastation. Although the preserve is no stranger to fires, the York fire claimed at least 80,000 acres there.
Desert fires are common, right? Because we do get weather systems that come through, lightning fires, you might get vehicle fires out in the middle of the desert that spread into the vegetation.
However, park rangers hold out hope that the Joshua trees and surrounding vegetative growth will eventually grow back naturally.
We're heartbroken to lose one of the most beautiful spots in Mojave National Preserve. It's really sad, Carruthers Canyon, it burned, but we also know that fire has been part of the landscape for thousands of years, for millions of years. It's been a continual part of the landscape.
Wildfires, like other natural disasters, are seen here as an unfortunate but normal part of life. Growth, destruction, and regrowth will continue in a perpetual cycle.
Seems like there's surprisingly thick vegetation there. You would think that it would be hard for a fire to spread if it were so sparse.
Yeah, that's a good point. But we're also heading to Mexico now, to the 18th annual Torta Fair, where almost 100 cooks gather to prepare what could be the longest torta sandwich.
Yesterday's gathering in Mexico City drew in large crowds. This year's extra-long sandwich measured 246 feet. That's nearly 4 feet longer than last year's record.
The sandwich is traditionally filled with a variety of meats, vegetables, and cheeses. Attendees were able to take a bite of the huge creation or simply try out different kinds of snacks from the over 70 Mexican and international sandwich vendors.
It is excellent because there are even some international exhibitors. The flavors are delicious. We hope this event will continue to be held. Families can come here to enjoy, to bring joy to their taste buds, and to try different sandwiches from different places in the country and of the world, as is our case.
For those that are wondering what distinguishes the Mexican torta sandwich from a traditional sandwich, is that it's much bigger and has a large variety of different fillings.
Much bigger? Did you see how wide that bread was?
I know, but it looks delicious.
I wonder how many people that can fill.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
All right, that's all for today's program. We'd love to hear from you. Write us at goodmorning@ntd.com if you have any feedback for us. Thanks for watching. I'm Evelyn Lee.
And I'm Kevin Hogan.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.